Well, hello everybody. My name is Roy Cohen, and I will be again hosting this week's Community Forum show, and it's a very timely show that we're going to be having you watch. You can't get them any closer than this one is going to be, because we're talking about the safe driving, the hands-free law that's about to be signed by the governor, we hope. And we have with us today Jerry Cibley, who is a prime mover of that particular bill. And we welcome you to the show, Jerry.
Thanks, Roy. It's always a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
It's our pleasure.
Let's get into... You've been a great supporter.
Right, well, absolutely. I believe very strongly in what you've been fighting for. I'm on the road constantly, and I do see a lot of distracted driving going on, and a lot of the distracted driving affects their driving skills. You're on 128 or one of the major roads, the speed limit's 60 miles an hour, and somebody is cruising in the second lane at 40 miles an hour, creating, I'm sure you've seen it, and it just leads to accidents. It leads to the drivers not paying attention to what they should be, and that's 100% of the driving that's they're embarking on. Jerry, I've known for a lot of years. I hate to tell you about the first time that I heard him, and it had nothing to do with this safe driving effort. I think one night, very much after midnight, I happened to be listening to the Larry Glick show on WBZ, and he took a phone call from somebody in Florida.
I was in Florida.
He was in Florida
on business,
on top of a billboard or something like that, and he was having a very lively chat with Larry Glick, and that just absolutely has stuck out in my mind when I think of Jerry and I think of our beginnings. But Jerry had an unfortunate situation happen, about 12 years ago?
12 and a half years, May 13th, 2007.
And for those of you who follow the show, I'm sure you remember seeing Mary McGuire interview Jerry about the tragedy that happened in his house. Maybe you just want to get into it a little bit.
Absolutely. I was also on the show when you were over at the Eastern studio.
Right, that's quite a while ago.
I think it was about 7 years ago, 8 years ago.
Right.
But it was May 13th, 2007. I was on the phone with my son Jordan, who was about to graduate from Foxborough High School. He had done his first 12 years in Stoughton. That includes the kindergarten year. And in his senior year, he moved in with his stepmom and I, and we wound up enrolling him in the Foxborough Public Schools. And he was having a great year. He was a prize-winning photographer, great personality. The women, they were clamoring to him. He was fighting them off with a stick, I think. After he passed away, I got calls and visits from these women young girls that I'd never met, saying I had a crush on Jordan, or I loved him. And
handsome boy.
He was a very, very handsome boy. He didn't take after his old man. He got very, very lucky. I think he got his good looks from his mother.
Right.
So Jordan had gone to the senior prom the night before with his girlfriend Larissa from Norton, and Jordan at the time was working at a photo lab. So Sunday morning, May 13th, it happened to be Mother's Day, and Jordan went out to breakfast with us, and then he went over to the store to process the roll of film, and he was taking the pictures over to his girlfriend's house and a couple of other people in Norton. One of the funny things about this day was that I asked him to get me the Boston Sunday Globe. And I said to him, don't forget, Jordan, you can't forget the Globe. I want to read the Globe today. Okay, Dad, I promise I won't forget it. And true to his promise, Roy, he did not forget the paper. And he got it. Mm-hmm. And then he drove off to Norton with my paper. Mm. So I found him about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Jordan, did you get the paper? Oh, yeah, Dad. Did you drop it off at the house? No, it's right here. Well, how is it going to help me? We laughed. Back then, Roy, we didn't think about distracted driving. It wasn't a word that any of us knew. I owned, at the time, I had 8 cell phone stores. I had hands-free devices. I had Bluetooth devices. I had a pilot headset for myself because I liked being in control that way. Jordan had 2 or 3 of them. I mean, seriously, I owned 8 retail stores, so whatever he needed. And he had a bunch of vehicle chargers, and we kept getting disconnected that day. And he was in Norton, and at the time we were on either Sprint or Nextel, I can't remember which one, but his phone kept dying. Get disconnected, I'd call him back, oh, sorry, Dad. And then at about 4:30 in the afternoon, after being disconnected 7 or 8 times, it happened one more time. And I've said this on many an interview. I believe I heard a sound like ooh or ah. It was so quick, and it still sticks in my head a bit, but I can't be certain as to what I heard. But we were disconnected, and both my wife and I tried him back for almost 25 minutes. And I had been lying down at the time. I was taking a nap, and I had a uneasy feeling, but I didn't know where he was. We didn't know what city he was in, where he was going, where he was coming, and he was a pretty responsible kid. He always wore his seatbelt, and at about 4:35 in the afternoon, I heard bang, 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 bang on the doorbell, ding dong, ding dong, ding dong, ding dong. I jumped up. My wife was on the first floor. She answered the door, and as I am flying down the stairs, I see a uniformed officer who's now become a very close personal friend of mine, Officer David Fiscaldo, who's now Sergeant Fiscaldo in Foxborough. First thing he said is, do you own a black? I said, yes, I got a black Hyundai Elantra, or whatever the model was, I can't remember. It was the smallest Hyundai that they made. I said, is my son okay? Because obviously, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure out that when a police officer has got to be a problem. Is my son okay? He said, Mr. Cibley, I don't know. He said, all I know is you've got to get to the hospital as soon as you can. So, having lived in Stoughton for over 25 years, when I think of a hospital, I'm going to Norwood Hospital. I said, oh, he's at Norwood, right? They said, no, he's in Attleboro. I said, oh, God, I have no idea where that is. I know how to get to Attleboro. And the Foxborough Police Department, where they were just amazing to me. He called the desk sergeant, who gave him special authorization to drive me to the hospital. And I'm on my phone the whole time. I called the police department, I called the fire department, trying to get any type of information. And the fire department told me that they had responded. I asked, where did he sustain his injury? And they said, it was his head, sir. And at the time, I remember consciously thinking, I don't want to have a son with severe, irreparable, traumatic brain injury. I've seen too much of it, and my wife works with that population. So I remember thinking, and I'm not a religious man, Roy, but I remember thinking, if something catastrophic has happened, let him not be alive, because I just couldn't imagine taking life away from a young man and having him not experience what he was used to. And we called the hospital. The hospital only would tell me, get here as quickly as you can. We pulled into the emergency room. Officer Fiscaldo came out with me. He literally held on to me as we walked right through everybody into the back. And a nurse approached us. She said, actually, I said to her, I'm Jordan Cibley's father. Is my son okay? She said, well, hold on a minute. Let me get the doctor. I said, please, just tell me. I need to know. The doctor came out. She said, can we go somewhere to talk? And I looked her straight in the eye. I said, no. I need to know about my son. And she said, I'm sorry. Jordan died in the impact. And then I let out this scream. I refer to it as a primal scream. The television shows don't do it justice when they tell a parent that they've lost a child. But I can tell you, Roy, it comes from a place from within your soul.
Sure.
And it's a disbelief. And by law, I had to identify my son's body. Had to go into the room. Fiscaldo came with me. And he looked beautiful. He was sleeping. It looked like he was sleeping.
Right.
And then our lives changed forever.
Oh, yeah. Understandably.
There's just nothing that compares to a parent having to bury a child. It is just, I've done research in linguistics, and I've tried to find some word in a language, in any language, that would describe, for example, when a husband loses a wife, he becomes a widower. Wife loses a husband, she's a widow. Child loses parents, he or she is an orphan. But I couldn't find anything as a single word that would illustrate a parent without a child. And I figured out at that time that the reason there are no words is because it can't be described in a single word. It's not supposed to happen. It
Right.
shouldn't exist.
Right.
Everything that could have gone wrong that day went wrong.
Yeah.
He was driving 30 miles an hour. He was wearing his seatbelt. He never went out in a car without a seatbelt. I believe, and the police speculate, that he somehow dropped his phone. He was on a side street, as I said, 30 miles an hour. It was a curvy street. And we believe he dropped it, unbuckled his seatbelt.
While the car was moving.
While the car was moving at 25 or 30, careened into a tree, and although the airbags went off, I think he was below the airbag, reaching, and I'm going to assume that it was the steering column that
He hit.
broke his neck or his head. Or they never did an autopsy. It wasn't necessary. They deemed it accidental death.
Jerry, I've heard the story before, and it's a very difficult one to hear, and I'm sure that the pain just doesn't go away.
You know, Roy,
this far down the line.
The last month has been very difficult for me. I told my wife last night through tears, and I don't cry every single day. I cry internally, but actual tears coming down my face, not as often. I think of him every single day with love, but when he died, I made a vow that he needed to be remembered. His life just couldn't be in vain. 18 years, he had to be able to show something for his life.
Right.
And at his funeral, I presented a eulogy. And I said many of the following words. Jordan will never be a Pulitzer Prize-winning photographer, although he was extremely talented. He'll never be a graphic artist or a newspaper still photographer or videographer, which is really what he wanted to do. He was going to start college in the fall. And I realized at that moment, I thought of the song, He Ain't Heavy, He's My Brother.
Right.
Who sang it, Roy?
I forget. I know the one you're talking about, though.
And so that kind of became my mantra,
Yeah.
that I have to carry on
That was the beginning.
in his name. And because he was injured in a car crash and his body had to go to the medical examiner, and there were specific details, plus he was an organ donor. And I'm pleased to say, although they couldn't use his major organs, his corneas restored sight to a 35-year-old woman and an 85-year-old man.
Wow.
And they used portions of his arteries, and I gave them permission to use whatever they could to help somebody else, because there was
Well, that was certainly,
he didn't need anything anymore.
that was very nice of you.
Well, that was the right thing to do as far as I'm concerned. I've been an organ donor since I was 18 years old, and Probably nobody wants anything I got anymore, but if you can save a life
Yeah.
or help somebody,
Gotcha.
why not? So the night before he was buried, as I said, it took an extra 2 or 3 days, and being Jewish, normally we bury the next day.
Right.
But that just couldn't happen because of the red tape. And I like to talk. I can express myself, hopefully intelligently, and
You do okay, Jerry.
I do okay, Roy.
I've never had a
And-
problem understanding you.
I got on the phone with WBZ. And at the time, my friend Jordan Rich, who I was not friendly with at the time, but he was hosting, he was filling in for what's now the Dan Ray slot. I think it was the Steve Sullivan show, Steve LaValle. I don't even know whose show it was. But he interviewed me. We spent almost 2 hours on air talking about where do we go from here? What do you think should be done? And I said, you know, we need a law to prevent people from talking on the phone and driving. And we have technologies, Bluetooth technology, which is really up and coming, and we can safely navigate driving while still engaged in a phone call. And I said, I'm going to do what I can do to get a law passed. Little did I know that 3 years prior, Senator Mark Montigny, I believe he's out of Fall River, Mark sponsored the very first hands-free bill in Massachusetts, which was summarily dismissed pretty darn quickly.
Why?
Well,
When they were being passed all around us in other states.
It was one of those situations where people felt that it was too much infringement on people's rights. You're not going to tell me that I can't talk on a phone when if I have somebody sitting next to me, I can talk to them. You see people putting makeup on. You see them reading maps. We used to see people reading newspapers. Today, I don't think many people read newspapers in their car, but directions, what have you. We didn't have GPS systems, navigation systems to the extreme that we have them now.
Right.
I can barely get out of a parking lot without my GPS. And the technology is incredible today.
It's pretty good.
It's real good. We've done a lot of good things, and the car manufacturers have done some wonderful things. And so that's where it began. And I have been up on the Hill for 12 and a half years. Last year, we really thought we had it pretty much done. And it just languished, and Speaker of the House never called for a vote on it.
Why?
At the time, he was not a supporter, Roy. Speaker DeLeo has gone 180 degrees and has become a very vocal supporter.
It's such a
this bill.
simple concept to
You'd think
help
so.
you drive safely.
You'd think so, but there are so many studies that suggest that even using a hands-free device, it doesn't eliminate the danger. And I don't have any scientific evidence. I just use common sense.
Yeah.
And my common sense says that if you have two hands on a wheel, instead of one hand on a wheel and another hand at your ear, you can react better to dangerous situations. It just seems to me that two hands are better than one. And that's how I've approached it. I do believe that if you have a passenger in the car, they can actually help you. I don't know about your beautiful wife, Carol, but my wife, Jerry, for the last 20 years that we've been together, she uses her brake on her side constantly and tells me to watch out. But over those 20 years, there have been at least 2 or 3 times where her warning significantly helped us avoid a very bad crash. Because she saw something that I didn't see, or even recently I was going through a red light. It was a place I'd never been before, and I didn't see it. I wasn't distracted. I just didn't see it. And she said, "You got a red light?" Oh my God, stop.
Yeah. So the speaker decided to not let it go and get passed
Correct.
when all the other states all around us had them in effect. I
Well,
believe Connecticut had it in effect.
New Jersey, New York, Connecticut, they'd had it for years. New York and New Jersey, I'm thinking 15, 20 years, hands-free only, with significant monetary fines associated with the violation. Now, as of today, we are the only state in Massachusetts that does not have a hands-free bill.
The only state in New England.
I'm sorry, the only state in New England, I know where we live. The only state in New England that does not have hands-free. Even New Hampshire, the live free or die state, has hands-free laws. They don't have a helmet law.
Okay, we must bring it up to date though, because possibly by the time
This
our
airs.
audience is watching the show, the governor will have hopefully signed the bill into law. It is
Well,
that close.
let's see if we can bring this back a little bit. So, in May, we got a vote of the House of Representatives. I happened to be on the floor. There are 3 chairs on the floor. You can't go on the floor unless you are either a state representative, an invited guest. So myself, a gentleman by the name of Tom Bramley, whose daughter, Katie, was killed in a crosswalk accident by a distracted driver, and Rich Leviton, whose daughter, Merritt, was killed with, I believe it was 2 or 3 other young women. They were on bicycles doing a bicycle tour. The Levitons were from Massachusetts, but this did not happen in Massachusetts. So we banded together. Emily Stein, who was Safe Roads Alliance, her father was killed, and so she left her role as a nurse and became a full-time lobbyist for safe driving. So the 4 of us, plus countless others, too many to mention, we all started lobbying. And as I said, they had the vote in May. There were 2 dissensions. Now, one of the components of the bill required, it was a mandate requiring the identification of a person's race and sex.
Why?
Because it was basically a rider that they put on it. They wanted to make sure that there was not any racial profiling. They wanted to help with...
What made them think there was racial profiling that they
Well,
had to be concerned about?
Roy, unfortunately, there's something, we have DUIs, driving under the influence,
Yeah.
and then we have DWB, driving
while
while black.
Okay,
And it exists.
that's unfortunate.
It
but
is,
go
it
ahead.
is terribly unfortunate. So they decided we need to have data. And the House and the Senate had 2 separate bills that addressed the data requirements, who the data would be shared with, how it would be analyzed. And on June 6th, the Senate voted. It was unanimous. It was a great vote. I'm proud to say that the senators, Paul Feeney, my senator from Foxborough, he delivered about a 10 to 15-minute speech about my son Jordan, mentioned that I had been there for 12 years. By this time, most of the Hill had a very good idea of who I am and what I was after. And then we had something that was just the most moving thing in the world. The entire Senate got up and gave us a standing ovation for our efforts over the last 12 years. It was a very emotional day. And that evening, I went back into Boston in studio with Dan Ray. And Dan had me on many years earlier, and Dan became a very vocal supporter of this legislation, even though he's a libertarian. He just basically agreed it's a no-brainer. This needs to be done. We can save lives with it. And Dan said to me, "How do you feel?" He said, "Do you feel like you've run a marathon?" I said, "I feel like I have run a marathon. I am so tired, but we're at the end." So the way it works when there are two separate and distinct bills that have been approved by the respective houses, they appoint a conference committee, 3 senators and 3 state reps. And they take those 2 bills and they meld it and merge it into a single bill that they sign off on, and then it goes back to the individual bodies for basically a cursory roll call vote.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that was on June 6th.
Of this year.
2019.
Yeah.
We celebrated. We were so excited we would have legislation we thought within a week or so.
Yeah.
Well, we couldn't get anywhere with it. They couldn't agree. The Senate president was not in support of making this happen in the timeline that we wanted. We wound up holding a press conference at the State House where we had every news crew in the city.
Sure.
One of them actually streamed it live. It was an hour press conference. We had multiple family members of victims who had been seriously impacted and injured in crashes were there to talk about a 2 or 3 year rehabilitation that has left some of them with life-altering damage to either be your brain or to their ability to walk or mobilization. We figured, how can they ignore this? We demanded, this must be done. I told Senator Spilka, you have to save lives. This is a bill that will absolutely save lives. There are 4,000 people killed a year in distracted driving accidents.
Both bills that they were both discussing were the same.
They were the same with the exception as to how the data would be distributed and collected.
Okay, what stopped them from passing the bill without the things that they weren't pleased about, that they couldn't agree upon, and then later on add that to the bill?
We pressured them, we begged them, we cajoled them, we used everything in our power to get them to separate out the bill from the mandated reporting.
Right.
And I was told by numerous senators, we will not allow this to happen.
Why?
I don't have an answer, Roy. I don't have an answer. If somebody out there can give me an answer, the ACLU got involved. The Massachusetts Chiefs of Police Association was not in support of this bill with the racial component in it. I'd like to think that I'm a fairly savvy guy. I have a pretty good understanding of how this works. And the other night I was on BZ 2 a.m. and Mark Rosenthal, who's actually an old childhood friend of mine, he was on the Morgan White show, Morgan's also a very close friend of mine. I had lunch with him yesterday. And they were talking about global warming. So, of course, I call in the back line, the phone number that Larry Glick gave me 30 years ago to get on anytime I wanted. And I was put through. Rob, the producer, who I know quite well because I've been on the show so many times. And he said, do you have a question for Mark? I said, yeah. So I bogarted my way out to the show. And Mark then started to interview me. And his question was the same as yours. Why? Why? Now remember, he'd been talking about global warming.
Right.
The whole show. And I said, to him, Mark, I have 2 words as to why this has not happened. And he said, what are those? I said, global warming. Because I don't have any other answers, Roy Cohen.
Well, what changed in the last week? I mean, all of a sudden...
There was so much pressure. I mean, every news station, I love to do a shout out to all of my friends in the media. These are people I didn't know before.
Right.
Every single news station has stood behind us, has helped the families of victims to move this piece forward.
But those who make the decisions are ignoring it.
They ignored us. Now,
that's not right.
On Friday night, I really, truly thought this was a dead deal, and I was prepared to start again.
Ugh.
Because if we didn't get this signed into law by July, we had to start from scratch. Friday night at 8 p.m., I received a phone call from the Leviton family saying, it's done, it's signed. And
With all the exceptions in it that you were concerned about?
they
Or they were
came
concerned
up with a
about-
compromise bill.
They did?
Yes, and you have it
Okay,
on one of your pages there. But
Right.
the long and short of it is there is a racial profiling reporting component, and we'll go over some of the details of the bill in a little bit. But at 8:20, Channel 5 was on the phone with me. Can you come into studio to be interviewed by Maria Stefanos? Maria's been a good friend throughout these years, great friend. And I was ready for bed. I was lounging around in jeans, and I said, well, I got to shave, I got to shower. You need to be here by 9. I said, okay, I'll be there by 9:02. My wife and I pulled in at 9:02, and Channel 5 broke the news. Channel 7, the next morning, they sent out a team to do another story. It was fabulous. They did a great job with it. And the next day, we got all the signatures. We had an agreement for all the signatures. I think we had 4, but there were 2 members of the committee that I don't think were actually physically in the building. So we now have all the signatures, 3 and 3, which has worked out very, very well. And now it's gone to the clerk's office, and I believe it's either on the governor's desk or waiting to go on the governor's desk. Somebody told me he may be in Florida. I don't know. He did not check in with me this morning.
okay. Like he should have.
Well, you never know.
You never know. It's
You never know. Look, I know Roy Cohen.
Yeah, wow, it's
So,
lucky you.
Yeah, big television star.
Right.
So
So
we are expecting, because of the importance of this bill, because of the emotional impact, they want to do a big signing ceremony in the governor's office.
Sure.
And I've been texting this morning, not while driving, with Senator Mark Montigny, who again has been the most amazing humanitarian I've ever met. I will do anything for that man. And I'm not allowed to go to the State House without dropping in to say hello to him.
Gotcha. You know, I recognize the importance of this and the attention it's getting. There's not a time during the day or night, and I have the radio on all the time,
Yep.
or the TV, that there are 2 subjects being discussed. One is the stuff that's going on in Washington.
Yep, and
And the
hands-free.
second thing is the hands-free.
And we've
What's the holdup?
Well, at this
Come
point,
on, Governor, sign it.
I'm hoping, because I right now have another news channel that's invited me in
Yeah,
tomorrow morning at 7:30 to go live. I can't say the name of the station, Channel 25,
gotcha.
with Gene Levanchi to go live, which I did about 8 weeks ago. And his question is, will the governor be signing tomorrow? And when I spoke with Senator Montigny, my suggestion was, let's get the signature on the bill, and then later in the month, in December, we can have a family event where everyone is invited and they do the proverbial one letter of the governor's name with a
Passing
different
of the pen.
pen. Yes, everyone gets a pen. And I was there when they did the no texting law in 2010.
Yeah,
I was with Governor Deval Patrick, and we thought that was a big step. We weren't happy that it was only no texting, but we were thrilled to at least get something. Now
got it started.
that bill has been a terrible failure,
yeah.
because police officers are not able to conclusively determine whether is somebody texting. No, I'm calling my grandma.
Let me see
if you got a search warrant. You can't see my phone. I'm calling grandma. You're going to have to take my word. If you want it, you're going to have to get a subpoena, and it's just too much work to do. It's too much work. So very few citations.
Well, it sounds like that's a change that they have to add to the law, where if the police officer wants to verify what you're doing with the
Now,
fellow.
that ACLU will never allow that. However,
Well,
If a police officer sees you with a phone in your hand,
yeah,
first stop, $100.
right.
Second,
This is the new law.
this is the new law. Second, $250. Third stop, $500. Re-education, meaning you got to go to traffic school, and you now have points
In your insurance.
on your insurance. So that $500 stop could be worth somewhere in the range of $2,500 or more
Sure. A year.
per year for, I think it's 5 years, maybe it's 7.
Let me ask you this, Jerry. Who was against the ban? Who was against the bill as it was written, and where are they now?
Well, as I said, there were 2 dissensions in the House.
And that was enough to stop it.
Well, no, I'm sorry. I'm answering a different question. It was most of the state reps, because Speaker DeLeo was not a supporter and the governor wasn't a supporter. The governor finally brought out his own version of a bill, and he's gotten behind it. And my sources tell me that as he's driving around, being chauffeured around by the state police, he's had an opportunity to see more and more and more people
Texting. Oh, yeah.
talking, looking down.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. They are not paying attention to driving.
Okay.
4,000 deaths a year
could see it.
nationally.
He could see it, finally.
And once you visualize it, once you see it, or Governor Patrick told me that he had his officer, his driver, stop somebody who was driving irresponsibly while talking on a cell phone. He was so angry. That was in 2010. He told me that story personally.
You know, as an aside, the other thing that bothers me a lot is when people cross the street in a crosswalk or wherever with their hands on the cell phone to their ear, and they're not looking to see if there's a car coming.
Have you seen some of the YouTube videos of people walking into fountains?
Oh, yeah.
People falling in holes?
Yeah.
So somebody asked me, well, Jerry, once this gets signed, what are you going to do? Well, I'm not done yet.
Oh, you're not going to retire?
No, I'm not going to retire from this one.
No, you're going to keep going.
I think we'll take the momentum and try and see what we can do about cellular phone use while you're walking.
That's next.
I think there may be a component in the new law. Talk amongst yourselves.
But the cell phone has become a great asset. It's a great item to have. It's got a lot of pluses, but there's also some negatives with it. We're hearing about it.
You know, Roy, when I was a very young man and I started out in sales, I was a road warrior. I didn't have a phone in my car.
Pocket full of quarters.
No, I had a credit card. I want to make a credit card. Yeah, 606-179-9516-2044.
Let me write that down.
You write it down. I dare you. Try and use it today. I don't even know if they exist anymore.
Right.
And I would call on clients for 2 or 3 hours. Then I would stop at a hotel, and you'd walk in the lobby, and you'd go like around the corner, and you would see 20 to 25 payphones.
Right.
And on every payphone was a sales representative.
Right.
Making their calls, next call, next call, next call. Well, I got my first cell phone in 1986, built into the car. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden, I was able to save 90 plus minutes a day. Now, the idea of giving up those 90 minutes, incomprehensible. You can't get that back. So to not use a cell phone for me was, I really can't exist without using a cell phone, but I can certainly use it hands-free.
I'm having flashbacks to the phones that I used to use, the Radiocom carriers, the RCCs, with an operator. You'd have to use an operator from your car.
Yeah, I'd like to mobile operator.
Right.
That was
pretty good.
That was in the 80s.
Yeah.
And the 70s.
They make your calls for you.
Yeah.
They take your calls for you.
It was a trunk-mounted system.
Right.
And I remember seeing my first one at Leechmere Sales as like an 11-year-old kid wanting my own phone in a vehicle. Never did I imagine that I would support my family through cell phones and that I would still be involved decades and decades later in communications.
What turned the speaker around? Speaker DeLeo.
Speaker DeLeo has been a very significant asset to us. I think
Yeah, but he was fighting it.
he was, but you know what? People change their mind.
Okay.
The Speaker, I just think the light bulb went off in his head.
As they say, dawn breaks over Marblehead.
Absolutely. And he was a
So
significant supporter.
He came on board.
Yep.
Then the House voted.
Yep.
And then
2 dissensions.
Yeah.
And then the Senate vote.
Then it sat in committee.
After the Senate vote,
This
June
is the,
6th.
the discussion of the 6
Yes.
members for 5 months.
Yes.
Nobody pushed them.
Everybody pushed them.
So what happened?
They couldn't agree.
Then the governor got on board.
They could agree to disagree. The governor got on board 2018, 2019. So we got a commitment, which I know he will uphold, that he will not veto this bill. He will sign it
I hope
into
so.
law. I can't imagine if he won't.
Who helped in the overall efforts besides the public?
Again, the news media was just absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, there's a lot of pressure being put on
There
by
was
them.
so much pressure, and I know they're not supposed to take sides, but boy, has
This thing is that important.
it was that important. It's going. Now, Roy, how many lives does the average person save in a year? 0, for the most part.
I guess.
You know, occasionally somebody's choking in a restaurant. You give them a Heimlich
Right.
maneuver. I used to do a lot of public speaking about distracted driving. And invariably, people would come up to me. They were saddened about my story. I had teenage boys that would cry on my shoulder, 16, 17-year-old boys, manly men. And they were just so moved by what I was doing.
Oh, it's an awful story.
And I've had people come to me to say, you saved my life.
Sure.
You saved my life. I used to text, I used to call. I was totally irresponsible
While they were driving.
while they were driving, yes.
Oh, it's so hard to do that. You're tuned out. You're not concentrating on what you should be concentrating on.
The acting town clerk in Stoughton, Stephanie,
Yeah.
she came to me many years ago. She gave me a big hug, and she said, you saved my life. I'll never forget that.
Really.
Yes. And we see each other at the town hall from time to time. And I mean, she made my day that day. She made my night. It's just wonderful to know that something that I've done in Jordan's name will help people. And that when I buried him, I promised he would never be forgotten. Somehow I would keep his name alive.
We're going to have to take a short break, but then I want you to maybe get into what you can and cannot do with the cell phone at this point, now that the law is just about...
We're there.
Okay. Can we take a break and you're going to listen to this wonderful person give the messages? We'll be right back. Hi, this is Roy Cohen. The crew would like to thank Maxie's Delicatessen, located at 117 Sharon Street in Stoughton. You can reach them by calling 781-341-1662. The American Cancer Society is looking for volunteers to drive cancer patients to and from treatments. You can volunteer by calling 1-800-ACS-6662 or online at www.cancer.org. Ilsa Mock's Food Pantry and St. Anthony's Free Market is located at 2 Park Avenue in Stoughton. For more information, call Christine Gallagher. That's 781-341-0611 or 781-341-0549. To get involved with Meals on Wheels, call Jessica at 781-344-8882, extension 2. The Stoughton Penny Saver. Our business is advertising your business in Stoughton. To advertise, call 781-344-4833. Community Forum showtimes here in Stoughton. You can see it on Thursdays, Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays at 6 p.m., Monday at 8 p.m., Tuesday at 5 p.m., either on Comcast Channel 9 or Verizon Channel 28. If you have any comments or suggestions, contact us at communityforum1@yahoo.com. Samaritans, 41 West Street, 4th floor in Boston, Massachusetts, 02111, or call them at 617-536-2460. The 24-hour helplines, 877-870-HOPE or 877-870-4673. Samaritans, 800-252-TEEN or 800-252-8336, or online www.samaritanshope.org. For you bingo players, I want to tell you about the Monday night bingo being held at the Ahava Torah Congregation, 1179 Central Street in Stoughton. The doors open at 4:30 p.m. The games start at 6:30 p.m. You come on down and win some money. They have two big prizes. One is $1,199 and the other one is up to $3,000. So come on
I
down.
want to talk about facts of distracted driving. I could do that.
We're back in. We have with us Jerry Cibley. He's a safe driving advocate, a successful safe driving advocate. And if you want to get in touch with him, you can dial him up at 617-828-3636 and talk to him about some of the stories that some of the things you see happening on the road, and maybe even some tragedies that you know about. His email is jerry@sibley.com. His website, hangupdrive.com. Get in touch with him. Jerry,
Roy.
You've almost made it with here in Massachusetts, and I'm seeing by the list here that all the New England states have this implemented except Massachusetts as of right now.
I hope by the time the show airs,
that'd be really nice.
We will have this.
And I'd love to be at that celebration. And Connecticut, New Jersey, and New York also have them.
Absolutely.
I have your next challenge.
What's that?
National.
Well, I will be reaching out to Congressman Keating.
Okay.
I have a long-standing relationship with Bill.
Right.
Matter of fact, he came to our Shiva house when Jordan died.
Mm-hmm.
And I will be reaching out to see what we can do to nationalize this.
That'll be a good project for you.
But first, I'm going to start with Florida.
Okay, because you live down there.
I have a home in Florida, so
Okay.
I think it's the logical thing to do. And I've worked with a couple of other safe driving advocates. I'm the only one that is, I call myself the lone wolf, because I'm not attached to any organization. I'm not a 501c3.
You're just a believer.
I'm just, I guess I'm a victim.
Okay.
I'm a victim. I've gone through it. I know.
Yes, you are.
Yeah, I've gone through it. I know what it's all about.
It's a
and
shame.
I want no one else to feel the pain
Tell
I've
us,
gone through.
Tell us about the bill. I mean, can I drive for a living, as you know.
Yep.
Can I pull over and text with
Well,
the car running?
Technically, no.
Okay.
The car has to be off. But I don't think there's any police officer who would stop you in a rest area. I guess technically they could, but I think it requires a little bit of common sense.
Well, okay.
And I would hope that a police officer would be as respectful to you as you are to this new law by pulling over to make a phone call. You can't have it in your hands. You can swipe to start dialing, but you can't dial, and you can't text.
Right.
You're actually not even supposed to use like a GPS while you're driving unless it's hands-free.
Right. The other day I received a text message from a boss, my boss, but I didn't respond to him for 20 minutes, and I figured I'd probably lose my job because I didn't respond right away. I waited until I got into a rest area,
Yes.
and then I responded.
Well, it took me a lot of years and a lot of self-control. I never texted and drove because I just wasn't a huge fan of texting. I'm still not, although it is a necessary evil. But I'll share this with you. My 2018 Hyundai has something called Apple Play.
Right, I know about that.
And I can actually receive a text message,
Right.
and she talks to me,
And you can respond to
and
it.
I can respond, send a response, and the voice recognition portion is excellent. The software is really well-rounded today.
I've had the same thing happen, but I don't even respond to the
Yep.
texts. I wait till I pull over.
Well, again, if you have a passenger in your car, you shouldn't. You're a professional driver.
Correct.
And I would not expect that. When I was on the Oprah Winfrey Show, there were about a dozen or so families that were flown in to be at the taping. I was lucky enough to have a 2-minute and 37-second segment. If anyone would like to see it, just look me up, Jerry Cibley, Space Oprah, and it'll come right up. There's unfortunately a commercial in front of it now, but we were picked up by limousines from the airport and then from the hotel over to the studio in Chicago. One of the family members, when Oprah was on commercial, said, "Are you aware of the fact that your limousine drivers, at least in our car, they were talking and texting?"
No.
And then Oprah said, "Did anyone else experience that?" We all raised our hand. Oprah looked at us and she said, "Are you me?" Expletive deletive.
Right.
And we said no. She said they're going to lose the biggest contract they've ever had in their lives. And when they picked us up, some of the executive producers were outside talking to the limo drivers, and Oprah did a dance on them. But I remember her saying, "I wonder how they're going to feel when they lose the biggest account they've ever had in their lives."
With the law in effect.
In Chicago, I don't know what the law
They're
was
just
at the time,
doing what they shouldn't be doing.
especially when it was the no phone zone, hands-free.
Common sense
Show,
dictates. How do you go around educating the public and the police department to learn about the law and to enforce it? How do we get the word out once
Well,
they sign it?
Remember this, it's going to be a 90-day implementation before they start writing tickets. But I think the most exciting part of it, it is going to be a significant revenue generator for cities and towns. And before, with the no texting, too hard to implement.
A revenue generator?
Yes, by
which
giving
means-
tickets.
Which means people are ignoring or don't know about the law. So I'm saying to you,
Well, no,
how
I'm
do
going to, it's a twofold question, twofold answer. The Mass Department of Transportation, they'll put up billboards like they already have now, and they will say it is against the law to use a phone in anything but hands-free, up to $500 fine and points. I'm sure they'll put something up like that.
Well-
There should be public service announcements. I'm actually working with, you'll get a kick out of this, I'm working with Mallory Lewis. She is Lamb Chop's sister, Shari Lewis's daughter. And we're talking about doing some public service announcements
PSAs?
with Lamb Chop talking about hands-free.
Okay.
And I personally do speaking. I'm available to speak to groups. I did a lot of that years ago, and unfortunately the bill lost so much momentum that we try to educate young people coming up to driving, and even the 2- and 3-year-olds. When my children, I'm sure yours as well, Roy, when they were 3 years old, I remember hearing them say from the back seat, "Put on your seatbelt, Daddy."
Oh, yeah.
And Jordan came home from preschool one day, and he said, "I know what to do if I catch on fire." I said, "What's that, sweetheart?" "Stop, drop, and roll." And Brenna said to me, "Daddy, if a stranger grabs me, I run and yell, 'Stranger danger, stranger danger.'"
Right.
And so we need to grow these kids up, instilling that you don't talk on a phone, and it'll become like seatbelts. We have great seatbelt compliance today
Right.
with many, many people. It's not 100%, but truly, I don't get into my car without a seatbelt. I know you don't.
I never go through a car wash without
Yeah.
the seatbelt on.
And I can still hear my mother, God rest her soul, but I can hear her saying, Buckle up, everybody. Buckle up. We're
Right.
buckled up, Mom. Stop it.
Right, right.
We hear you.
Let's put your slide up again if we can, with your contact information. Mike, here we go.
Thank you, Mike.
What number do you want? You want the
617-828-3636. I'm glad to chat with you, accept speaking engagements or any type of educational programs that I can help with. I'd like to think that in the near future, I hope Chief McNamara is watching. Donna, I'd love to, when this is law, I'd love to have the opportunity to ride in one of the cruisers and see enforcement in action and talk to some of the people who are stopped that are still talking on the phone and tell them a little bit about my story. Maybe you can sentence them to watch Oprah Winfrey.
That'd be an
it.
interesting thing to do within the first 90 days.
I think so. I'd like to also ride with the state police because I'd love to see it on.
Are there other people that'll do the same type of outreach that you're doing?
There are a few. There are some people that are very private about their grief. Mm-hmm. Some people that are more comfortable public speaking and being on national TV or local TV.
We need more Jerrys.
Well, I don't think the world's ready for more, Roy, but we're pretty good with what we got.
With your information and your ability to tell the story, hopefully you'll be very successful. And I want
I'd like to think so.
I want to thank you very much for coming on, and let's hope that everything goes well, that the governor signs it, the 90 days happens, and people then start recognize how important it is not to touch their phones while they're driving.
Would you like to be my guest at the governor's office when this is signed?
I think that would be a thrill that I would love, yes.
I would
In the
love to
meantime,
invite you.
I want to thank Mike Hammond for his assistance, Dave Young, let me see, who else are we talking? C.J. Mullen, and the whole staff. We appreciate the help you have given to get the show on the air. And this is Roy Cohen saying, I hope you enjoyed this show. Pay attention. Stop texting while you're driving, and we'll see you again soon.
Stop talking.
That's
Stop talking on the phone.
Right.
You're right. Thank you.
Okay.